Thank you very much, Zipporah. I think first, my name is actually Meena Raman. It's not the ramen. I still see Ramen, so that's the noodle, but I'm not the noodle. And greetings to you, and I'm coming from Malaysia. Yeah, I think what's really critical is that, as others have also said, the difficulty that we are facing and why the Paris Agreement was actually quite weak, and why governments could not muster the political will to go in the right direction in terms of really addressing fossil fuels head on, clearly represents the fact that many of the governments actually were unable to do that, largely because of the influence of the fossil fuel industry, precisely in the UNFCCC space. And corporate players play a very big role, in they are in the front line of much of these negotiations, and we are aware of that. But this principle of the Paris Agreement is very dear to many developing countries, and that's the common but differentiated responsibility. The point that those who actually cause the historical emissions and the cumulative emissions, for which many of the world, the what Mitzi was talking about in terms of Philippines and the frequent hurricanes and all the damage that we see around the world, we are all aware of the fact that that this has happened because of history. And so, in order for us to really move, for us, we need to understand that any treaty initiative has to be based on an equitable principle, one that is just. We completely agree that this is imperative in terms of focusing on the fossil fuel producers on the supply side, because we have been missing that piece. There has to be a global phase down, but it must be within a framework that is just. And just to give you an example, many of the developing world, like mine included, I mean, I come from Malaysia, middle income country, very famous for Petronas, our petroleum. You see Formula One and you know Petronas. It's a big company. Now it's a state-owned company. 20% of the government revenue. We're talking about government revenue. It's not about Petronas's revenue, but Petronas contributes to 20% of our government's revenue. Now, this is quite a big thing. And it's not just for Malaysia, it's also the same for many oil dependent countries, whether we talk of Ecuador, whether we talk of Venezuela, whether we talk about the Middle East. Now, many years ago, when I was a young climate activist in the UNFCCC space, I was challenged. Why am I talking to Saudi Arabia? Why am I engaging with the Gulf countries? Aren't they the culprits and aren't they the problem? And I ask myself, I mean, for those of us who come from the developing world, we have absolutely no choice but to engage with our governments to ensure that while we understand where the source of the problem is, that we need to find the way in which to solve the problem, so that we engage with them to make the transition and the diversification happen, the move away to happen. It's not going to happen just because somebody is dreaming about it. The treaty is not going to happen overnight. There is no political will at this time in our we see the pandemic, the global pandemic, trillions of stimulus packages going in the wrong direction. Many countries reeling with economic crisis at the moment, not being able to cope with the pandemic. The UNCTAD recently estimated $2.5 trillion that developing countries are facing, many going into a debt crisis. So the rich world may have options, but we don't have an option from the developing world as civil society here. We have to engage with the reality. We have to talk to Petronas. We have to talk to our government. We have to engage with the Gulf countries. So how do you make the shift happen? And so many of us have been looking to the hard reality and the sobering reality that the time has come for us no longer to depend on fossil fuels for the revenue. This is not Shell, this is not Total, this is not Chevron, but it's about real change that needs to happen in our country. So we are responsible for that. But the final thing I would say here is that many people say, keep oil in the ground, keep coal in the hole. I used to say, add one more phrase, and that is put money in the fund. This is only going to happen with finance of a massive kind, financial flows that will have to happen. Muhammad talked about the renewable energy transition, the massive, so that countries don't have to repeat what the rich world has done. But I'm so shocked that the rich countries like Germany or Norway, they're still stuck in fossil fuel expansion. I mean, we know the US, we don't have to talk about that, and Canada, as you say. But if the rich world doesn't show the example, how on earth are you going to expect the poor world to move in that direction when fossil fuel dependence is quite large in terms of government revenue? And that's the challenge that we face. And so we are happy to be in this network because I think there's a lot of hard data, hard research. There is a very good paper by Greg Mutit and Sivan Kartar talking about equity, climate justice, and fossil fuel extraction. How can we do this in a just framework? A treaty has to be within an equity and just perspective. Otherwise, it has no chance to move forward. So we look forward to working with all of you in a lot more enhanced way. And just the final point about all this net zero. I mean, it's just bunkum. It's just delays. It's more nonsense. Don't fall into this net zero rubbish because we are seeing that Shell is knocking on the doors of my country, going into forest areas, indigenous peoples, and these are the new carbon cowboys who come and say that we want to buy credits from you while you absorb the emissions that they are putting out. I mean, even scientifically, it's flawed methodology. So anybody who is going to stay at the Climate Ambition Summit and believe these net zero targets, my final message is don't be fooled again. You can fool some people sometime, but you can't fool us because the truth is out.